All right, we're just about at the NFL draft. So who better to bring on than ESPN's insider, Adam Schefter? Adam, thanks for joining us. Appreciate the time, my man.
Thank you for having me, Jordan. Appreciate it.
I know this is a crazy week for you, right? The draft week. I'm curious how many phone calls, texts you're receiving, sending, like the lead up to the draft, I'm sure is crazy for you. What just take us for a second what that's like the first few days before the draft.
Well, you would think that it would be, and it's busy. Don't get me wrong. It's not like free agency. First of all, free agency is just nonstop sprinting all the time. This is a little bit different in the sense that teams are in meetings a lot of the times during the day. So what I've noticed is that my phone will ring in the early morning hours. Sometimes it rings midday when there's a break, and the busiest time has been at night from roughly 5:30 Eastern to 8 o'clock Eastern. Like literally, I'm sitting down with my family, and inevitably the phone rings. And it's been going like that for a couple of weeks now, with everybody, the teams in their draft meetings. So there are pockets where it's going to be busy in a day with phone calls, and it has been. But there are certain times, I don't know, 9 to noon Eastern, nice and quiet. The ability to go tape this podcast with you. 1 to 4 Eastern, 1 to 5 Eastern, pretty quiet. Like you can do some work, get some work done. I had to write a big draft intel column for ESPN, wrote 5,000 words. That's running draft week. So things like that you do.
There you go. That's you do notice that. That's actually interesting that you say that. That's like the coaches' hours. When coaches call you, it's
Right.
usually on their ride to work or on their ride home from work. Like those are the
Correct.
two prime times you hear from coaches. That is always true. But the hot topic, the one people are probably calling you about, asking you about, is Shedeur Sanders. I'm sure. Like that's a hot topic, and even I get like random defensive coaches just wanting to give their input on what they think of Shedeur Sanders. It's crazy, but that's kind of the way it works. I'm sure you get that as well. What are you hearing about that? What do you think the possibility of that at the Giants at 3 or high in the draft? Because I'll tell you for a second. Let me just tell you kind of what I hear is that and this isn't a knock on Shedeur Sanders that he can't play in the league, that he's not a good player. Like there's nothing wrong with being a bottom half of the first round talent, but that's kind of the consensus that I hear from coaches and personnel.
Right. Um, what's amazing is, and I said this on Get Up on Thursday, but I had one person call me on Wednesday afternoon and guarantee me that Shedeur is going through to the Giants. And by the way, this person has a pretty good track record. They've been right before. They've made some great, bold predictions to me that have taken place. And then I've spoken to other people, smart people who know the business, who know the game, who understand everything, who say to me, no way the Giants are taking Shedeur at 3. So which one's right? I don't know exactly
Yeah.
which one's right. And we won't know until draft night. And we don't know whether there's going to be consensus, whether John Mara is going to overrule everybody, whether they're going to decide to play conservatively or go a little riskier. Like there's a lot of ways to look at this. But the point is that I've heard both. I've heard that they would consider him 3. I know that doesn't seem to be the popular opinion these days. And it seems like there's more evidence that they wouldn't take him at 3. And I understand that. And that very well may be the way it goes. All I'm saying is I've actually had people tell me they're going to take him at 3. Now, I don't know what's right. I just don't know what's right. We'll see how it works out. But obviously, it's going to be the most intriguing question of draft night.
I feel like that's kind of the job, right? You take a lot of information, you have to decipher what's true
Right.
and what's not. And for the draft, that's especially hard because most of the time, no, the team who's making the pick is not calling you and saying we're drafting this guy or we're drafting that guy. You know that like
Well, actually, I like it when they do that. I often have situations like that where I know what a team is doing, and that's kind of the fun part about it because then you're speaking in a more educated way. And
right.
by the way, like they may think they're taking it, and you don't know how it's going to evolve. Like, so if they're trusting you, you can talk about it and frame your answers in a way. I mean, there have been certain players over the years that I had a pretty good feeling that certain teams would be taking. Um, you never know until the draft comes. You never know how it's going to change. You never know who's going to be off the board. So things do change, and it gets a little different like that. But uh, I like I like that more. Rather, like
Right, of course.
I'll say this. I'll give you an example. Like on Monday in this draft column that's running on ESPN, I'm just going to say like a couple of times I just put things out there with teams like that haven't been as forthcoming. I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to unload everything I got, and I believe that's probably going to be right. So other times, like if a team, you're going to be more careful with more information that you know, rather than a team that is less cooperative, if that makes any sense.
For sure, for sure.
No holds barred. No holds barred on teams that aren't as forthcoming.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right? No, but all this with we're sitting here talking about the possibility of the Giants taking Shedeur Sanders at 3. The flip side is there's these two prospects, Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. And a lot of people think that they're head and shoulders above. Blue chip,
Right.
generational, maybe an overused term. I don't think it is if Travis Hunter's going to play both sides because we've never really fully seen that, even if it's like 75% of the time. What have you been hearing from teams? Are those guys really that far above everyone else that, hey, we can't, that it would make sense for the Giants when you say, well, maybe they can't pass on them because they're considered that much of a different kind of prospect?
Yeah, Jordan, what I would say to that is, yeah, in the eyes of personnel evaluators, these two players seem to be the best two players in this class. They seem to be. Whatever that means. That doesn't mean they're going to be the best players in this class.
Right.
But going into this process, yeah, they seem to have the highest grades. I had somebody text me yesterday, a team like, hey, is it true that Abdul Carter hasn't interviewed well? And I shot it back to a couple of people, and they're like, that's from a team that wants him to fall. Like, so that's the kind of thing that is going on. I think it's safe to say that those two guys, not any news headline here, have the highest grades going in. But I don't know that, somebody's like, I heard Abdul Carter might not have interviewed well. Maybe he gets past, the Browns and Giants and he's going to slide down. And then I don't know where he go. Like, okay, well, we could do this with every player, like at this time of the year. And that's part of what goes on. But I think those two guys seem to have the highest grades of any players in this class.
It reminds me of a story somebody told me about when Nick Bosa was coming out. Somebody said to this guy, a personnel guy with the team, hey, somebody was telling me Nick Bosa might fall out of the top 5, maybe out of the top 10. And he said, listen, when that guy calls you next time, you take the phone and you hang it up and you don't talk to him, you don't listen to him again because that's not happening. So,
well, the amazing part is, but the amazing part is, your job is to be open-minded and to listen to everything that comes your way. And there's a lot. And it's amazing, like on draft, I love to go back and look at my notes from before the draft. Oh, this person was on this, or this person was way off, or whatever. Like almost like my own scouting reports. And the draft unfolding, like, oh my God, Michael Penix did go 8. Like I mentioned, which I did. I mentioned that possibility in my notes column last year that he could go number 8.
Keep an eye on Adam's notes column.
I said he could go as high as number 8 to Atlanta. Did I think that was going to happen? No. But somebody mentioned it to me. So I mentioned it, and it happened. So, you just never know. You have to be open-minded, curious, question everything, wonder about everything, and ultimately the chips fall where they will on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
One of those things is the Giants pick is contingent on is what the Browns do, right? They're drafting number 2. We would pretty much think that number 1 is going to be Cam Ward to the Tennessee Titans. So I'm going to go work on that assumption as of now. Fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Number 2, you got the Cleveland Browns. Okay, so there's these 2 premium blue chip generational prospects, whatever anybody wants to call them, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter. Where do you see the Browns at right now? We're taping this on Friday morning-ish. So 6 days before the draft.
Friday, April 18th, I reserved the right to change my mind on Saturday, April 19th or Sunday, April 20th.
Right.
But I would say as a general rule that when a general manager is comparing a player to Shohei Ohtani the week before the draft, when he's saying that he's a unicorn the week before the draft, as a general rule, I'm going to say a GM is going to gravitate towards that kind of player. I think that, to me, is a safe assumption. Now, again, they might move off Travis Hunter, but it is felt like it has been tracking that way for a few weeks now, and I'll continue to stay in that camp until there's a conversation or information that dissuades me and pushes me in another direction. Now, I do have some calls into various people around Cleveland, so I do have the ability to change my mind this weekend, and I might. We'll see. But prior to those conversations, as we tape this Friday, that's where I'm at.
Right. Hey, fair enough. Hey, everything with the draft is contingent on change. Let's make that this early disclaimer. It changes all the time. Opinions change. What you hear changes, and might change the shape of what you feel and what you think. Mm-hmm. So that would leave. Let's say that plays out that scenario. That would then leave Abdul Carter available to the New York Giants with the number 3 overall pick.
And that would seem to me to be the obvious pick, unless somehow, some way, they decide to go Shedeur.
With Abdul Carter in particular, there are some things that have been out there. There's some off the field stuff in the past. There's also the injuries, right? He wasn't able to work out. He had the shoulder and was it the shoulder and the foot that came up during the combine. When you talk to people around the league, do you find that those are anything that's concerning, or teams are really looking at moving into the week before the draft?
I have not found that to be the case. I'm sure teams are taking a long, hard look at it. They're real, those issues, but I have not heard that stopping him from being a top pick in this draft.
Okay, so now the Giants, let's say they go and they take Abdul Carter. So it goes 1, 2, 3, Ward, Hunter, Carter. What happens with the quarterbacks? Like that does that now throw the draft, upside down? And it's just like, holy cow, when do these quarterbacks come off the board? Because you're sitting there, you got the Raiders there. Some people think, hey, they got Pete Carroll. Doesn't make a ton of sense at this point. Nope. They just signed Geno Smith. Nope. The Saints, you hear, hey, you know what? Maybe they Tyler Shuck, and that's a guy later on down the road.
But
so where are the spots that we could find the quarterbacks, and then what kind of opportunity does that then create for the Giants or the Browns or whoever might want to move back into the end of round 1?
Well, there's literally an arms race that goes on then. That's going to be the most fascinating part about this, because if the Giants pass at quarterback at 3, if they do it, maybe they do go it. But if they
we're working on hypotheticals, to be clear, these are all hypotheticals we're just going through. Okay.
If they pass at a quarterback at 3, my reading the tea leaves is that the Saints would pass a quarterback at 9. That's what I'm reading. So let's operate in a hypothetical universe for a moment, that the Giants pass on a QB at 3 and the Saints pass on a QB at 9. It gets real interesting, because to me, you got Pittsburgh at 21, you got Cleveland at 33, you got the Giants at 35, and so somewhere in that range where you got a lot of teams that are willing to move back, and these teams sitting where they are, it comes down to like how much you value a certain quarterback and what you're willing to do to go get him. But Pittsburgh doesn't have a 2, so if they don't get one at 21, they're not getting one till the 3rd round unless they somehow trade back from 21, which I think is actually more possible than the Steelers trading up. The Giants and Browns could move up. Is that worth giving up next year's 1 to go move up, which is what it might cost? Like, that's going to be a pricey proposition. I don't know that you want to do that. So maybe everybody just stays where they are and waits for quarterbacks. I don't know. But we're talking about Shedeur being the most intriguing storyline in the draft. And I also would say that is singularly the most interesting storyline, but big picture, as it always is, where are all these quarterbacks going? And I just think we're going to see this rush from 21 to 35, Saints turn. So I don't know what the Saints pick is in the 2nd round, roughly 40, we'll call it.
I think it's 40 on the dot, to be honest with you.
Okay, well, there you go. Yeah, 21 to 40. Like, we're going to see, I think, a slew of quarterbacks go. That would be my guess. That's my guess going in, my read, 21 to 40. Buckle the seatbelts and get ready for the ride.
Okay, so there's these guys coming down. We'll say drop, but that's maybe what these teams view them as. Because when I talk to a lot of teams, they're like, a lot of these guys, it's always like that guy's a 2nd round talent. but obviously quarterbacks didn't get pushed up. So maybe
or,
that's kind of what
or
they are
maybe not. Maybe they don't get pushed up this year. Quarterbacks
generally.
generally quarterbacks do, but this quarterback draft class is not considered as strong as others in other years, whatever that's worth.
You see a team that maybe okay, so these guys are available down there. A surprise team that might be in on quarterbacks when
Well,
if it reaches that point.
I think there's always those questions. Like you wonder at some point, would Miami take a quarterback? Would Arizona take a quarterback? Again, those teams like their quarterbacks. Miami likes Tua. Arizona likes Kyler. But you've heard things in the past like, oh, what about Tua's injury history? What about, Arizona's long-term commitment to? So could they come up and take one ahead of a? That would be a little bit of surprise. But I would think that these teams like Arizona, like Miami, like maybe Indy would take, like the Raiders, like the Jets, would take quarterbacks in the middle rounds. Whatever that means. Somebody's going to take Kyle McCord. Somebody's going to take the quarterback from Indiana, Florida, whatever it may be. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of teams that take quarterbacks. But the headliners will be the ones that go day one or Friday night, rounds 2 and 3.
You talk to a lot of people around the league. We'll end on this one. What do you view as the consensus, right, with grading the quarterbacks? Obviously, I'm sure people have them all over the place. Cam Ward, I would assume, is number one. Like, the people you're talking to, how would you rank them?
It sounds like Cam is 1. It sounds like Shedeur is 2. Really, it's a question of beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
For sure. What flavor ice cream you like?
Yeah, some people like vanilla, some people like chocolate, some people like chocolate chip, some people like strawberry. Rank. What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything because somebody may value Tyler Shuck more than others. Somebody may value Jalen Milroe more than others. Somebody may value Jackson Dart more than others. It doesn't really matter. I do think that Cam Ward will go 1. I still think, despite other people saying it's not, I still think Shedeur will go 2. And then it'll be very interesting to see how the other 3 quarterbacks go off the board. But I don't think that they'll be on the board very long.
Here's what we know, Adam. The NFL draft on Thursday into Friday, and maybe even into Saturday with some of these quarterbacks is going to be very fun and intriguing. So enjoy Green Bay, enjoy the draft, and we appreciate you very much for the time.
Thank you, Jordan. Have a great draft. Appreciate having me today, and hope everybody out there enjoys the draft.
Anytime, Adam. Thank you. On to the next one.